Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April 25th, 2023 Higher Education Tableau User Group. We're thrilled that you could join us today. We have a lot of fun things planned for you. All right, so to start off, we are going to open the floor for announcements, followed by Meet a Community Member with David Martin from OSU, The Ohio State University. We're going to have a Viz of the Day Spotlight, where I'm going to share a Viz that I built, I guess, earlier this year. And then we're going to have Ken Says Sankeys with Ken Flerlage from Moxy Analytics, formerly Bucknell. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Tableau conference this year, and then we're going to have a wrap up and chat with our usual breakout groups. And if you could stick around for that, it's been a lot of fun lately. So first, we're going to open the floor for announcements. If you have anything you want to mention, a job opening, or anything that you want to bring to our attention, just come off mute and let us know.
Well, I'll chime in since I'm about to come live on the floor, but we have a position that is going to open here in a couple months at OSU as a data analyst in our space information and management team. So if you guys are interested or would like to learn more, please reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat, but definitely interested to hear from you guys. Hopefully some analysts out there would be interested in joining Ohio State, the Ohio State University.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? Well, if nobody else has announcements, I will go ahead and say that Analytics Day registration is open. I've put the link in the chat for anyone who's interested. You can go to our website, learn more about it. You can go and register directly. For anyone who's not familiar, Analytics Day is an annual event that Appalachian State University has been putting on for about 6 years now. It is free. It is essentially one-day mini conference, jam-packed full of nothing but Tableau visualizations in higher ed. So if you can make it for even part of the day, go ahead and sign up. We'd love to have you there. All right. So the other announcement we want to make is that we are officially 100% moved over to Bevy now. Previously, the Higher Education TUG was hosted on Splash. Now we're on Bevy. That means that you're going to have to go in and create a new account on Bevy in order to keep getting our emails and our updates. It is not linked to your Tableau account, so you're going to have to go ahead and create a new one. And I would encourage you to go ahead and do that now. Roshni put the link into the chat box. You can scan the QR code if you don't want to click on the link. We just love to have you continue to join us for the HETUG meetings, and we want to make sure everybody stays, in the know. So definitely go ahead and get that set up, because our next one's coming up fast. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our Meet a Community member for the month. David Martin is a senior facilities data analyst at The Ohio State University. He started out in facility management and somehow built up to his current role in facility data management. While he once, maybe, thought about building pipelines, literally the kind in the walls, he now helps design, build, and implement data pipelines and visualizations for many of the university's operations data sets. So David, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invite. I appreciate it.
All right, so you know how this works. We're going to ask you a few questions, and then we're going to follow it with a lightning round. So I'll start off with just tell us a little bit about yourself and describe your role and your team.
Yep. So here at Ohio State, I work on a team called Facilities Information and Technology Services. We are tasked with managing much of the university's facilities and spatially related data. So we've got 3 different teams. One is the architectural services team that manages all of the 3D models for campus and room numbering, things like that. We've got the GIS team that manages all the mapping data for the university. And then we have the data services team, my team, that handles space data and then a lot of the integration services. So when anybody across campus wants to integrate with our data sets, we help them with that. And then also if they have their own data pipelines that they need built out, we help them, or at least within the operational sphere, the shared services. We don't help the academic folks, they can figure it out. So.
That sounds like you have a lot of people.
Yeah, we have 12 people on the team.
Nice. What type of data do you work with?
As I mentioned, facilities and spatially related data. So, it's everything from utilities to work orders, the space data for campus. We work with the architectural services team. We're building out some new API resources built around the data that's coming out of the Revit models, looking at schedules of doors, windows, that sort of stuff.
That's so interesting that in your at your institution that's housed in facilities. At mine, it's housed in institutional research. It's so interesting how those are set up differently. All right, so how do you use Tableau at work?
Well, but pretty much like everybody else, right? So I do a lot of prep work in Tableau prep, of course, and then just building dashboards both for the FITS team, but also for helping units across campus. I think one thing that I've done that might be a little bit unique is I'm actually using Tableau prep as a data pipeline for one of our data ingestions. So we have a facility condition application that's managed by a vendor. And we pull that data into our space information and management system. And so when Tableau added the ability to write to a SQL server via prep, I decided to play with that. And so we are consuming the facility condition index and estimated replacement value of facilities from that application, and then writing that to our SQL server. That's our application for managing space data. So it's fun.
Fantastic. Do you have a favorite Tableau project that you've worked on?
Yeah, there was a project back summer 21 when we all thought we might be going back to campus. Everybody wanted to know, okay, well, what did going back to campus look like? And so we ran some reporting around office utilization. So that involved going out to all of the units within A&P, our administration and planning, which is our shared services unit that my group is a part of. We went to all the individual units, audited where all their office occupants were, ensured we know where the offices were, and then built some reporting, bringing in HR data, bringing in the mapping data, and match that up with our floor plan data to create some nice tools to figure out, like, okay, well, is operations using all of their spaces, or are they using 60% of their spaces, and trying to figure out how we could fit people back in. Actually, I think I presented that dashboard at Analytics Day last year.
I thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind if I interject a question from our audience. Christy wants to know, how long does it take you from start to finish to create the project? And do you make the projects for the upcoming academic year?
We're talking dashboards, I'd imagine, like a new dashboard project. I mean, okay, so really, obviously, it depends on the scale of it, right? So one of my most recent projects was tying into our construction project management system and building a dashboard so that not just the construction project management team, but our stakeholders as well could know where a project is and where, not just on schedule, but on budget. And if I think about how long that took, we probably had a draft dashboard built in a couple weeks, but we then took, several months to kind of dial it in from there, right? Because once all of the data was in place, the financial side of the house was able to see information they weren't necessarily able to see otherwise. And so they had to kind of change some of their own practices. And then that, necessitated some changes to the dashboard as well. So, that's generally how it goes.
Thanks. So how long have you been using Tableau and how did you learn it?
I've been using Tableau for about a little over 3 years, and mostly free content. Although when I got my desktop specialist certification last fall, I did sign up for the Udemy course. That's kind of if you go on Udemy and search for desktop specialist, there's the one at the top that's like everybody has done. And that was actually a really good course. And we used that last fall with the group here to get certified.
Oh, we've got another question from the audience. Maria would like to know if you have any space utilization dashboards on Tableau Public or available to the public.
I've not posted anything to Tableau Public, but I'd be happy to meet with anybody that's interested to see kind of some of the work we've done. Feel free to email me.
Awesome. We'll put your email in the chat later if you have a minute to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what is your favorite Tableau feature?
It just prep. The whole tool is amazing. I think that's one of the differentiators for Tableau. Certainly Power BI has some prep tooling that can do most of what Tableau does, but I think the interface and the constant development of prep is part of why I love prep so much.
I have to agree. It'd be a lot harder to do our jobs without it.
Yeah, for sure.
What is something about Tableau you'd like to learn more about?
APIs and automation. There's some limitations that come with Tableau out of the box that I would like to overcome. One of them being the inability to connect to SFTP locations to grab files. So I know we'd be able to build that out using an API. And so it's kind of where I want to go next. I just have to get the central campus Tableau team to let me build the API. So we'll see.
Yes. What is one thing you wish you could go back in time and tell Tableau newbie you?
Get in and break stuff and then figure out how to fix it. Really. The tool is so powerful and you can get lost in it so quickly. But if you can get in, get lost, and break it quickly, and then figure out how to get out of that, you're going to learn so much more than just watching a YouTube video and whatnot. And then the other thing I'd say is learn how to read technical documentation, and that goes across the board to any sort of technical app. Tableau's documentation is actually pretty good compared to most. So definitely learning how to read the technical documentation is valuable.
Yeah, that's something I have not learned to do yet. Do you use Tableau outside of work? And if so, how?
I would probably not ever use public resources for public or for personal gain. So yeah, I'll avoid that one.
And another question from the audience. Are the Ohio State University dashboards in the public domain or behind a firewall?
So depending on the data, some of the dashboards could be requested by the public if they were to. But there's certainly others that aren't necessarily just public by default. There'd have to be a process for ensuring that they remain secure.
I agree. And finally, is there anything else you want to share before we go to the lightning round?
Just if you guys are interested in joining Ohio State, definitely email me because we're going to have a great job open here in a couple months. And we have an amazing team. We work with a lot of amazing data. We do lots of fun stuff with 3D models of the buildings, mapping, and definitely reach out.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll jump right into our lightning round. Today is National Telephone Day. You might have noticed all of the songs in our opening segment. How often do you get calls for the other David Martin at The Ohio State University?
Not too many phone calls, but emails all the time. I had to add my middle name to my Outlook name, and that's helped, but I still get them all the time.
That sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, it's also National Hug a Plumber Day. What is the most interesting facilities issue you've had at home?
Having flashbacks to my daughter putting a toy in the toilet, of course, right? And not being able, no matter how hard I tried, I could not get that toy out. And I had to completely take the toilet off, take it outside, and punch that toy back up from the bottom. So
Oh, goodness.
2-year-olds.
Yes, I was about to ask how old she was when she did that.
Yeah.
All right, so in honor of National License Plate Day, what would you put on a vanity plate?
I make. Do you want me to explain?
Yes.
So I'm a maker. I make things in everything from wood to metal to applications and programming, and I like to make stuff.
Uh-huh. So it'd just be IMAKE or
Mhm.
okay. All right. So the next one, it's National DNA Day. I don't know about you. I got an email from Embark about their discounted DNA testing for dogs today. So what would be your favorite and or least favorite inherited trait?
Well, my desire and need to make things is probably one thing that I got from my grandfather and that I greatly appreciate. But at the same time, not wanting to let anybody else do anything around the house because I know I can fix it myself. And just when that happens is going to be the problem. And that's where it becomes a pain point.
Yeah, time is of the essence.
Mm-hmm.
So today is also World Penguin Day. Who knew April 25th was such a big day? So do you have a favorite movie featuring penguins?
I literally had to Google penguin movies because I was like, there's penguin movies. And it turned out I have seen March of the Penguins. So since that's the only one I've seen, that's what I got to give you.
That's fair. I don't think I have seen a penguin movie unless, Batman Forever, if that counts.
Oh yeah, there you go. That counts. Sure.
All right. So yesterday was National New Kids on the Block Day. Who is your favorite new kid on the block?
This is another one I had to Google, and I guess since I don't really have any favorite, I'm going to go with Mark Wahlberg simply because he wasn't in the band when they were famous. He was in it before they were famous.
Okay. See, you already know more than I do about the band then. And, I grew up in a time when they were really big, but my mom didn't let me listen to their music. So, all right. 2 days ago, April 23rd was World Book Day. So what is your favorite banned book?
Favorite banned book? Ooh. That I was not prepared for. Let's see. How about looking
bookshelf you can cheat?
Yeah. So how about Looking for Alaska?
I don't know what that one's about. Can you tell us?
It's it's mostly about the author. So as to why I support it. John Green, he's an author, YouTuber, and a lot of his books have been banned recently. He's actually a young adult author, and so because I follow him on YouTube, that's where I'd go for the banned book.
Awesome. Well, I will have to look that up. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow is National Pretzel Day. So would you prefer mustard or cheese sauce for your pretzel?
I mean, I'll go both ways, but mustard is my first choice.
Good choice. And keeping with our food theme, tomorrow's also National Stop Food Waste Day. So what is your favorite thing to have for leftovers?
Indian, all day, every day.
Yes, good stuff. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our lightning round. If anybody would like to be a Meet a Community member in the future, please reach out and let us know because we would love to have you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. I'll put my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David, for that great session there. The irony of introducing someone who's been talking for half of our session already is not lost on me, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ginny Moench, who's an enrollment management BI analyst at Appalachian State University. And they're hosting Analytics Day, which you already saw in the chat. So that's coming up. If you haven't registered, you should. She needs no further introduction, though, because she's been around this higher ed user group for a little while and done an excellent job of hosting it, if I must say so. Virginia had a Viz of the Day, which you're going to get to see very shortly. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit more and ask some questions. So Ginny, what inspired you to create this Viz?
Well, for anyone who doesn't follow me on Twitter, you may not know that I started collecting vintage romance novels during the pandemic. And it all started, I guess, back when the Iron Viz feeder theme was art. And I followed this feed on Twitter where Art of the Clinch is the name of the account, and she tweets out different romance novel covers and gives information about the artists and like the history of the cover, if that is applicable. So I started following her, and then I started compiling all of her tweets into a spreadsheet, and eventually I started building other romance novel inspired spreadsheets, like the hero and the heroine's first names and their last names and their occupations and the time period and the first line of the book, just all these different Viz ideas that I have that I want to build around romance novels. But this is the first one of those I built after the Iron Viz. And it was looking at the first names of the heroes and the heroines from romance novels.
Very cool. Can you walk us through how you created it? Did you make mock-ups along the way? When did you realize you were happy with it, or are you happy with it for that matter, and where you landed?
Well, I'm going to share my screen and show, I guess, a little bit of that creation process. So I actually start in Trello with a bit of a brainstorm about the business that I want to build. So the book's popular first names is my brainstorm for this. And I had, we have this group. If you were in last month's HETUG meeting, you might remember hearing about the Pick Your Passion group, and our theme for the quarter was books. So I was brainstorming what I could do with books, and this is what I came up with. So I started in Trello, and that was my brainstorm. And then I go from there to kind of sketching out what I want to do in a journal. And this is nothing like the final project. So I wanted to do what's in a name. So I have the females on the right side and the males on the left side. And I wanted to have the alphabet from A to Z going in opposite directions on each side. And then I wanted the specific names on the inside of the circle to correspond with the letters on the outside of the circle. And then for every time you clicked on a name, I wanted it to connect the heroine's name and the hero's name to an image of the book in the middle, or the title and author in the middle. Well, that did not work. I still don't really know how I would need to set the data up in order to make this particular Viz work. And maybe I'll figure that out one day. But I kind of started out there, ended up here, kind of scrapped the original idea, but stuck with the circle.
Very interesting. I feel like there's a tip out there somewhere from Andy Kriebel about how to solve that particular challenge. But we could all create Vizes forever if we kept going that route too. So what did you find most challenging outside of getting that label to land where you wanted it around creating this Viz, or the process of creating it?
Well, the most challenging part was the circle, but I'll talk about that in a minute. The data collection and cleaning and structure was another big challenge. I did all the data collection myself, but I really prefer doing all the data collection myself because I know exactly what's there and what isn't, and I know exactly the level of granularity and how the data all works together, and I can structure it the way I need it to be structured from the very beginning. So that is something that I like about collecting my own data, but it's also difficult. It's time consuming. And for this particular Viz, I sampled 254 different books, not all of which I own. So I had to go online and scour book reviews and synopsis and find all the names that I needed. But as for the circle itself, if I go in to the workbook and just show the issue I was coming up with for the circle. Every time I tried to build it, it was starting with the A over here at the 9 o'clock, and I really wanted the A over here at the 12 o'clock. So I ended up having to build in this 0 factor in order to, it's a parameter just to let me fiddle around with the numbers until I figured out how to get that A at the top of my clock. So that was the biggest challenge I had with the dashboard itself.
Very nice. And what did you find rewarding about going through this process?
Well, I'm not going to lie. Getting this today was extraordinary, a huge honor, and something I've been hoping for and working for years. But also just the level of engagement that I got from this viz, not only from the data community, but people outside of it in the romance community who really, don't necessarily know anything or have anything to do with data. Well, not that they cognitively have anything to do with data. Everybody has something to do with data. But I think that interaction from them and their excitement and their just comments on the viz were very exciting for me.
That's great to hear. Would you go back and do anything differently if you had a do-over on?
I think the biggest thing I want to do is have all the letters of the alphabet represented. Like right now, there are 2 letters missing, Q and X. And I'm sure that there are books out there with, the hero and the heroine's name starting with those letters. So I would go and take a larger sample so that I could finish out this circle. And I'd also like to come up with a way to connect this bar chart at the bottom with the bubble chart in the middle, at least with some sort of highlighting action or something, because right now they kind of just exist separately from each other, and I'm not really happy with that user experience part of the chart.
That makes sense. Maybe there's some people in the audience that have book recommendations that start with Q or X to add to your visualization in the future.
That would be great.
Oh, they're in the chat now. Look at that. Great. Well, thank you so much, Ginny, for walking us through some of this. This is a really great visualization. And congratulations again on Viz of the Day.
Thank you.
Oh, there was one question in the chat that I missed. My apologies, Mike. The question is, do they both come from this same data set? Oh, if you had your ideal books beginning with Q and X, would they come from the same data? I think is how to interpret that.
Oh, if I was going to look for more romance novels, as long as they fell into that historical romance genre or subgenre, then any hero or heroine who had a name starting with those letters would be eligible to be added to the data set. Yes. Oh, I'll put my Twitter handle in. Sorry. It's under Ginny.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
All right. And up next, we've got a guy who you guys might already know, or you've probably seen his name once or twice when you've, looked for things for Tableau. He's got a yen for making asks of Tableau and data, and without a key, that is sans key, he makes magic happen. And his name is, of course, Ken Flerlage. So you might remember Ken from an early HETUG Meet a Community member session back when he worked at Bucknell. He recently took a step out of academia and became a Tableau evangelist and data engineering consultant at Moxy Analytics, where he helps clients solve problems with data. He's an active member of the Tableau community. He's a forums ambassador. He's a member of the Tableau Visionary Hall of Fame. And he spends his time answering questions in the forums, engaging in data viz discussions on social media. You might have read something of his on the blog that he runs with his brother, FlerlageTwins.com. So his brother, Kevin Flerlage, identical twins, also a Tableau visionary, but not a Hall of Famer yet. And as some of you may know, Ken is my favorite Flerlage twin. For one, he's got that whole higher ed history thing happening. I mean, loyalties, higher ed beats every other industry. And second, his name, Sankeys. And so today, Ken is here to share his some Sankey knowledge in what we're calling Ken Says Sankeys. So welcome, Ken, and take it away.
Well, thank you for having me. So thank you for that introduction. I can probably skip by my little intro slide. I'll just note that I spent 7 years leading the data analytics team at Bucknell University. I left there 2 weeks ago to join a consulting firm with my twin brother Kevin. So we both work at Moxy. Just a quick picture of some of the things we do. It's a small consulting firm, but we do a lot of things in the data space. Everything from data analytics strategy to data literacy to data governance. And of course, the sort of more technical things. Specifically, things Kevin and I are doing are focused around Tableau, although we do things outside of that as well, other sort of technical things, data engineering, that kind of thing. We've got Tableau Lifeline service, which is sort of, pay by the drink kind of thing. Fractional data hero, where maybe you need a little bit more of our time on a weekly basis. And then, of course, typical sort of project work. But that's all for sharing about Moxy. I'm going to jump right into all this stuff about Sankeys. So we're going to get pretty deep into this. We're going to dive really deep into Sankeys. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about how they work and what they're used for. We'll give some really good examples from higher ed. We'll talk about some of the problems with it and how that's led to some interesting innovations. We're actually going to build some. And I'll show you 3 different techniques for building a Sankey, all pretty easy, I think. And then at the end, we'll show just some alternatives to Sankeys. So let's jump into it. So to my knowledge, we're going to focus on Tableau, but to my knowledge, the first Sankeys that were ever built in Tableau were these by Jeff Schaefer, Sankey Lake, I guess. And these were 2014, I believe. So Sankeys are 9-10 years old in the Tableau world. So these are the first ones I'm aware of being built in Tableau. And this was, Tableau's come a long way in 9 or 10 years. So being able to do this was pretty impressive. But believe it or not, these are not actually true Sankeys. So true Sankey is this kind of thing. This was created by Matthew Sankey and named after him, I believe in the 19th century, and it really to show the flow of sort of energy efficiency in steam engines, right? So you see these sort of similar things that we see in a Sankey, sort of the width of these flows and some directionality, but these flows are kind of all over the place. It's not the sort of beginning and end that we see in a lot of the Sankeys that we talk about. Some other examples of Sankeys, and we see things for a lot of it's around power grid. This is the original Sankey there, and a variety of other types of things. But these sort of flow lines and arrows kind of all over the place, and the arrows have to sort of show this directionality. When we talk about Sankeys, particularly in the Tableau world and often outside of it, what we're really referring to is technically called an alluvial diagram. We see a couple of examples here from the DataViz catalog, one showing European asylum seekers. This is in a different language, but I liked it, and I just liked the way it looked. I have no idea what it's showing, right? So these alluvial diagrams are what we're going to focus on here in this Sankey discussion today. So let's talk about sort of what it is and how it's built, right? So a very basic Sankey looks something like this, right? And imagine, higher ed has a lot of good use cases, and I'll show you those. But actually, hold on, let's just jump into some of those use cases, and we'll come back and take this apart, and I'll show you exactly how it works. So this is big data, but just to kind of give you an idea of a good use case is major changes. So imagine, you have students who could be one of these four majors: physics, mathematics, chemistry, or biology. They can change their majors, but they can only stay within those four, just for simplicity's sake. So we can use a Sankey to kind of show how people move in and out of different majors, and really gives you a good feel for how this is happening. The width of these flows is the number, really sort of represents the number of people, as does these bars represents the number of people in those groups at each of these stages, right? So each of these stages might be their academic year, for example. We see we have, a bunch of people started with physics, and then a whole bunch of them moved out of physics. Some decided math, some decided chemistry, some came back to physics. In the end, very few people actually ended up studying physics, right? My brother is actually a good example of that, because he did that exact same thing and ended up in math instead of physics. So that's basically, a simple use case, not really simple, but a use case for Sankeys in higher ed. One actually plucked right from Bucknell's website. This is available on our public website, is our career. I say I guess their career path, since I'm not there anymore. The data is a little bit old, but they collected information about students and the industries that they worked in after they left college. And this shows on the left the majors, what they studied, what their degree was in, and then on the right the industries they were in. So it really shows us really good information. Biology major, well, you imagine a lot of those work in health and medicine, but we have people working in banking and finance, and nonprofit and civics, scientific research, right? So it really shows the industries and the possibilities for students with some of these specific majors. So that's available on the public website, and you can go check out those and look at some of the different other divisions at Bucknell. So let's now sort of take this apart and look at the different components of what makes up a Sankey. So here we have a Sankey. Basically, we have this just a simple, two-step Sankey. We have one step on the left side, one step on the right side, and in between we have these flows. So really the starting point are these bars. And these, you can kind of think of these as kind of like stack bars, right? Stack bar charts. The size or the height in this case is really the percentage of students that are, or in this case, if we're talking about students, if we're talking about, say, majors, it would be the percentage of students in that major for this stage. So maybe this is an academic year. So obviously there are more source twos than source ones. Generally, we end up putting a little bit more spacing in between those just to, give a little bit of padding, but basically they're stacked bar charts. And then we have these curves that are showing the flow from one thing to another. So again, imagine this is the source two is physics majors, say target one is math majors. This is showing approximately half of those physics majors decided to move to math in their second academic year. So the width of this flow is representing the number of students making that sort of transition. So let's break down this curve a little bit. So think about how you would build this in Tableau. Basically, we're drawing one curve from the top to the other top, and then a curve on the bottom to the bottom, sort of closing those curves and then changing that into a polygon to create this curve like this. And then we layer in those other polygons, and we're able to create that Sankey. But if you've ever tried to draw a curved line in Tableau, it's not that easy. So I have this wish that Tableau would have the ability to specify how to connect two dots. Well, we'll come to that here in a minute. But basically what's happening is we know the position of each of these dots, this dot here and this dot here, and we want to connect them with this curved line. All we're able to do in Tableau is to connect them with a straight line, right? We choose that line mark type, and it connects those with a straight line. What I would love to be able to do, and maybe we'll see this at some point in time, would be to specify a curve type, right? To say, oh, give me a sine curve and connect those with a sine curve. We can't do that yet. So what we end up having to do is applying these this is a very advanced technique. I'm not going to get into it in a lot of detail, but we're applying data densification. And data densification in this context is really just basically padding our data, adding additional rows to our data so that we can create more sort of steps along the path of this line. So for example, here I'm connecting these two dots, but I've added 3 additional points within here. And then I've applied the mathematical curve of a sigmoid curve in this case. And so it starts to look sort of curvy, but those 3 dots aren't enough, right? So if we add a few more dots, start to see something that's a little bit more curvy. 50 dots looks pretty curvy. Let's remove those dots. This looks pretty much like a curve. Ultimately, it's just a bunch of individual line segments. It's just these dots connected one to another. But because we've created enough of those, it ends up sort of tricking our eyes into looking like a smooth curve, right? And that's this data densification technique that's used to create these curves in Sankeys. If you want to learn how to do this, you want to see more on how to do this, this kind of technique is used for anything curvy used in Tableau more than just Sankeys. So you just search for data densification Tableau, and you'll find my blog, which goes into detail about how to create this. There's also a video on that as well. So coming back to this, you can kind of get the idea, like as long as we know the start and end point, then we can use those techniques to create these curves, to draw those lines. Then we draw the line on the bottom, and then of course turn that into a polygon, and you have a Sankey. And that's basically how Sankeys are built. It's certainly complex, primarily because of that data densification, but there are other little complex things in it as well. But ultimately, it becomes a really useful tool, a really useful chart. Let me just show you a couple examples. This one was created by Jeffrey Schaefer. It's showing personality types. I love this one. I just think it's beautiful and insightful, and it just has great color usage and fonts and all those kinds of things. And I think it's a great example. Another one by Yvette Kovac shows job application process. So unlike the Sankeys we've seen before, well, this has 2 differences. One is it's not left to right, it's top to bottom. And 2 is you have things sort of dropping off of here on each of the different stages, right? This is a job application process. So there are going to be people who were rejected or who didn't reply. So it sort of narrows it down as we go. And I'll share a little bit more about this sort of technique here in a moment. Now, one problem, so I do a lot with Sankeys, and I'm going to show you a bunch of templates that I've created on my website to make these easier to create. But one of because I spent so much time in these, I kept noticing this one problem, and I really wanted to solve it. So the problem here is with the way we're building this. Again, we're drawing that top curve connecting the 2 dots, and then the bottom one connecting the dots. And you'll notice in the middle that there's a bit of a narrowing, right? It's not the same distance between the lines all the way down that path. And to just show it a little bit closer, this was taken from Jeff Schaefer's blog. You can see with a sigmoid curve, this is typically historically what Tableau Sankeys have used. You see this really big narrowing, right? It's less of a case with something like a sine curve. You could also do Sankeys with a straight line. We'll talk more about that later. There is none of that here, but as long as we're using curves, this technique creates that sort of narrowing problem. And I'd really like, it seems like maybe it's just an aesthetic thing, but it also could cause the chart to be somewhat misinterpreted, right? This flow looks like maybe you could guess that it's not that different in size from this one, and it's just because of that narrowing. It really kind of fool with our brains and our minds and our eyes to make us think that the flow is actually smaller than it is. So ideally, we keep this one width all the way through that curve. Now, another thing that sort of exacerbates that problem in Tableau is the width of our sheet. So it's essentially these flows are a sheet that we've put on a dashboard. And if we make that, if we change the width of that sheet on the dashboard, it exacerbates this problem. So this is the exact same sheet. One is sort of in a 1 by 1. And then the second one is half the width as the height, right? And you can see that there's much more narrowing in this because of that impact. So I wanted to solve this problem. I wanted to make sure we had this sort of equal width all the way across that flow. I was personally beating my head against the wall, so I'll give my brother credit for this idea. He was actually on vacation, and I was messaging him about how do we do this, right? So he came up with this brilliant idea that I ended up sort of writing out here on a piece of paper. And the idea is basically, let's draw one of those curves, and then let's use some math to basically find a perpendicular line to those, draw it out by the width of the curve, and then we'll draw the other curve along those points. So essentially, we're guaranteeing, we'll go into more detail than that, but essentially we're guaranteeing that these two lines are completely parallel across the entire flow. And by doing that, we can ensure that equal width. It was a brilliant idea, so I went into Tableau and applied it and ended up with this equal width Sankey. This is also one of our templates. You can see, though, with these flows that are going, from high to low, there's no narrowing at all. All these curves are remaining the same width all the way across. And what's beautiful about this technique, this is using a sine curve here. What's beautiful about this technique is it works with any type of curve you want to apply. So this is a sine curve. We can do a sigmoid curve, and we have the exact same thing. It's always going to be equal width. And that really sort of reduces the possibility that your users might misinterpret it because of that narrowing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the templates that are out there. These are templates that I've created. So one of the things I found when I first started trying to work with Sankeys was there were good blogs on it, but they were really hard. It was hard to go through them and create them from the ground up. Lots of complicated table calculations. So I thought, well, maybe I can just templatize this, right? So I just built upon, what other people had created and created a bunch of templates, and then over time sort of added some new innovations to those as well. So all these templates are available on our website, flerlagetwins.com. We've got a basic Sankey, multi-level Sankey. So instead of just a to and a from, we've got multiple levels. Traceable Sankey, aggregate traceable Sankey, Sankey funnel. I'll talk about those in a moment. And then we have the equal width Sankey. And we're going to build these. I'll build one of these in a moment, just a basic Sankey, so you can see exactly how the template works. This traceable Sankey, I think this could have some really good use cases in higher ed as well. So again, imagine the major changes example. This red line here would just be highlighting an individual student, right? So you might want to see select from a parameter your different students and just sort of see how they're switching as they go along in this. So it just allows you to focus in on one particular element of that. A slightly different version of that is an aggregate traceable Sankey. So imagine, again, these are physics majors. So we're just highlighting all that group of physics majors and just their flow through the entire cycle. And then the last one is this funnel Sankey. So this is pretty similar to that job application one that I shared, and it allows things to sort of drop off through a period of time. So the example here I'm showing are sales leads, but I think this could be particularly useful with, say, an admissions funnel, right? So you can really visualize, what's happening through each stage of that admission cycle until, we get to sort of matriculation, or even take it further all the way to graduation, right? So I think that would be a really great use case for this Sankey funnel. Okay, so let's take a moment and let's build a Sankey using a template. I want to show you how easy it is. So there's two components to the template. There is a workbook and there's an Excel file. I start you off in Excel. There are ways relatively easily to switch this to, say, a real database, a SQL Server, MySQL, or Oracle, or whatever, right? But the template basically has, you can ignore this link. You just need it in there because it's going to connect to our model. We have step one, then our sources and our targets. Size is really just the measure we're measuring. So imagine physics to math majors. This would be indicating that 100 students changed from physics to math. Model is part of it. This is used for the data densification to create those curves. You don't have to worry about this. Just got to make sure it's in your data set. We're going to join it together in Tableau to be able to draw those curves. So what I have here is some migration data. So it's showing migration from different continents. I forget which year this is, but you can see number of students who migrated from North America to North America, number of, did I say students, the number of people? People going from North America to Africa, and then the number of those people making those migrations. Again, we have our model sheet in there. And then, of course, the second part of this is the Tableau workbook. Let's get that open here. So this is connected to that sample data set that I showed there. To put our migration data set in here, we just click over to data source. We'll select our migration file. And with a little luck, it should automatically update. Yep, we can see everyone from Africa and where they're going, and then all of our individual flows. So really just a couple of steps you're able to create a Sankey using this template. It's very, very easy to use. It's meant to be plug and play. There is this little parameter as well. You can sort of increase or decrease the white space however much you like. So that's a Sankey using my templates. All the templates are relatively easy, pretty similar to that particular example. But there are other ways to create Sankey templates. Tristan, I'm going to mess up his name, Gullivan, he's a Tableau visionary from France. I think he's living in Holland right now. He does a lot of web development. He's a Tableau expert, but also does web development. So he created this nifty little website that allows you to upload data and then download a Tableau workbook with Sankey in it. So let's actually create one using this. So let's click on this website. We'll jump out to the website. It's got some sample data in here that we can work with. I'm going to select file. Actually, let's jump over here and let's look at the data. So this is the migration data that I'm going to bring in here. Whoops, can't have two with the same name. Let's close all these. So I'm gonna use this. His tool is a little bit more flexible than mine in that you don't have to have certain names for all these fields, but to have the data in this format, I'll bring it over. Obviously, we don't need that model data because he's doing everything in the tool. So I'm going to open this data set. And we get an error. So error circular link. So what this is telling us is that, I'm not sure why this is, but it's saying that we can't have values in both, or duplicate values in both of these steps, right? So I've got North America here and I've got North America on this side as well. Same with pretty much all of these, right? So what I did is I edited this data source. Let's find this one. I basically just added a space after each of these to create a unique value. And when we do that and bring it in, we'll have something that looks very much like that Sankey we had before. We can download it in a bunch of different formats. I'm going to download it to Tableau Desktop, open it up. And here we have a Sankey. So if we look at the sheet, it's one sheet, whereas my template was multiple sheets. It's all polygons, so it does create some limitations on what you can do with some of these things with labeling and that kind of thing. We also have, and it's using this sort of clever map layers technique, which I won't get into, but map layers are kind of a cool way you can take data that isn't maps and force it into geographic sort of coordinates and then use it to create map layers. So that's what he's doing here. And we can do, everything else we might want to do with this. So for example, if we want to put source on the color, we can color the flows by the source and can do anything else we would like to do with Tableau. There are, again, some limitations here. Labeling these polygons is always a difficult thing in Tableau. So labeling can be a bit problematic. I think, from my perspective, the biggest problem is that you have to use the tool to update it, right? So imagine in your student system, this data is changing all the time, right? If you're doing major changes, that can happen, There's probably a period of time where it can happen, right? But it could happen on a daily basis potentially. So ideally, you want a flow, a data pipeline that is coming right to your data set and automatically refreshing that on some scheduled basis on your Tableau server. And with a tool like this, that limits your capability of doing that, and that might force you to use a different method. All right, one more method is Tableau Public. So how many people saw Tableau Public literally yesterday just announced this pilot of new mark types? Let's actually open the website. It just, the blog was written a few days ago, but they just posted this yesterday. So Sankey mark type, and there's also a radial chart mark type. So you can do sort of these radial type diagrams and things like that. So this is just a pilot. It's a temporary thing. I think that, my understanding is the goal is eventually to bring it to desktop. But they're giving us an opportunity to try this and to give feedback and that kind of thing. So I'm going to actually go out here and build one directly in Tableau Public. So this is only available on the web editor on Public. You can't do it in the desktop. So we'll just create one right here from the web editor. Upload my data. I've got my migration data in a similar format to what we've shared before. So select that. See our data here, our to and from, and the number of people. We'll create an extract, take a drink while it's doing that. For some reason, my number it's thinking is a dimension. I'm going to change this to a measure. So to create this, it's really just a couple of quick steps. We will change the mark type to a Sankey. We're going to drag from and to this new level card that is here. And you can see we get this kind of ugly, but we get each of our to and froms, and we get lines connecting them. We haven't defined the size of the flow yet. So let's take this number and drag it onto this new link card, and then we get those flows. You can see that they have this automatic labeling. Let's just turn this off for now. It's just adding a bit of clutter. And the end result is pretty much the Sankey that we've built here, right? We can change the colors. We can do different things with the colors. If we click level, we can change the width of these levels, right? So if you just want that maybe to be really narrow, kind of like Tristan's example, and we can create some padding in between those as well. And in the end, we have a pretty nice looking Sankey that looks pretty similar to the other examples that we've shared. So this is out there now. They're piloting for, I think 6 weeks, but don't quote me on that. So definitely go out there and experiment with this. Try to create some Sankeys using this technique. Warning that if you save anything on Tableau Public, once the pilot is over, it's going to be torn down. So it will sort of be reverted back to the capabilities prior to that. So they won't stay there forever, but definitely worth going out and checking out and playing with, and understanding how to use Sankeys a little bit easier. All right, so almost done here. Let's just finish this off by talking about some sort of alternatives. So I mentioned that we could draw a Sankey using a straight line instead of a curve. That actually has a name. It's called parallel sets. And here's an example of parallel sets. Essentially the same thing as a Sankey, except straight lines instead of curves. It does automatically sort of address the issue with the width of those flows. But I think it's, these hard angles for me, I think are a little harder to follow those flows. I think there's something about the curves that just make it easier to sort of follow it from one step to another. During all this time, we've been creating this migration Sankey, right? And one special thing about this is that all the nodes on the left are also on the right. And in this case, this opens up a bunch of new possible chart types that we could use. So one, I've created, I have a template for this. I don't love this chart, but it's called Arc Sankey. So we can see, for example, if we look at, so we only have one node for each of these, but we can show the sort of bi-directional flow. So we see this node for South Asia. This pink flow going to West Asia is the flow of people from South Asia to West Asia. For ones on the left of South Asia, those are the ones on the bottom. So you can see these pink flows going to see Europe and North America, showing the size of those flows of people. I think this is a little busy, a little bit hard to read, but might be an option for some use cases. Another use case is a chord. These are really hard to create even in Tableau, so I didn't even create one with this data. But I'm showing, and I think Ginny actually shared this exact chart or on an earlier slide when she was talking about phones. But this was actually created by Nadia Bremer. If you don't know Nadia Bremer, check out her website. She does amazing data visualization work. This is not built in Tableau, but you can build these in Tableau. So this is showing people what kind of phone they were using and what they've switched to over a period of time. So you can see bidirectional information here, and I want to focus on this curve here, Samsung and Nokia. So this is showing people moving from Samsung to Nokia, and this small little section is how many people. So a very small number of people, whereas the vice versa, Nokia to Samsung, there's this huge number of people represented by the width of this curve. So it automatically sort of shows this bidirectional flow of information. Nadia also created this beautiful Lord of the Rings thing. It's probably more like a Sankey, showing each different setting of Lord of the Rings and the characters, and you can hover over and see the speaking, the number of words or lines spoken by those characters. It's just a beautiful Sankey. And not to be outdone, Luke Stanky. If you don't know Luke he's a Tableau visionary as well, does a lot of great stuff in Tableau. He created something similar to that in Tableau, showing Harry Potter and speaking amongst two other people. And with that, I think I'm pretty much at my time. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about Sankeys. Hopefully you can see some use cases. Again, I think there are so many in higher ed. Hopefully you can see some places where you can apply these in your own work. And I don't know if there's time for questions, but I'm happy to take any if there is time.
We've got all the time in the world.
Right,
so
great.
we did have a couple of questions that came up during your session. So somewhere around the time where you showed that drawing that you and your brother did while he was on vacation,
Yes.
the question came up of what level of math would you suggest is a minimum requirement for someone to utilize Tableau to the level that you do?
It's interesting, right? Because I have a math, my brother has a math, majored in math in college. I have a minor in math. I always liked math and I was good at it. But I remember taking trig in high school and I literally didn't use it. I don't think one time until I picked up Tableau, and I started seeing people doing like these different radial charts. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. That's trig, right? It's just basically sines and cosines to get the coordinates, and, sort of looked up the trig again and was able to figure out, this is how you do these kinds of things, right? So ultimately, it's not calculus, right? It's not linear algebra or any of that kind of thing. There's some basic algebra, basic geometry, and some trigonometry that gets used here. Nothing too crazy. If you want to learn more about like how you start building these advanced charts, I have a whole series called Beyond Show Me. You just search for Beyond Show Me. There's 3 blogs. Kevin and I actually did the Tableau conference presentation on it as well, which I think is really valuable. But it really goes through step by step how we're creating these things, how we're applying some of these trigonometric formulas and things like that to create some of these more advanced types of charts.
Great. One other question that you kind of answered it later on, but most of the examples that you showed us were Excel files. I mean, I'm sure a big part of that was just for simplicity, because no one wants to wait for a database link to work and load data in a live demo. But you also mentioned at some point that it can get tricky when you have data that is changing from day to day. So do you have any recommendations for using live or sort of more frequently changing data with Sankeys?
Yeah. So, again, the Excel file is really just for ease of use. It's a sort of, I can share the file and everyone can use it, right? You can plug your data in, but, I don't recommend, for a real life scenario, I recommend connecting it to your data warehouse or wherever your data is stored, right? And then setting it up to be refreshed. Generally, I can actually show this briefly. I mean, what I would suggest, where's my share button? Generally, what I suggest doing is, kind of get your data into the structure or similar structure. Ideally, it would have sort of the same name, step 1, step 2, all that kind of stuff and size. But it doesn't have to be, because you can kind of fiddle with that later. And to do that, you could, put it through sort of like Tableau prep, or you could write custom SQL or something like that. But then just go create a new data source. I can bring in one of these data sources, say my migration data, bring in your data source. You do have to do a join with the model. So look at what I've done here, but then, sort of build that and then just come out and do replace data sources. So just to replace data sources and choose your other data source. It'll automatically bring all the calculated fields in, and it should just sort of easily work that way. You might find a couple of little red pills or whatever, and then it just means you have to go adjust something. So just undo what you did, go make that adjustment to that new data source, and then keep trying it until it works. So that's generally my recommendation. It's relatively easy to get it connected up to your live data that way.
Yeah, well, one thing that we did, we ended up using a Sankey, and I believe we started with your templates for an advancement dashboard showing how our prospects move from one stage of development to to giving a gift and on. One of the things we ended up doing was actually taking that model that you have in your and putting that into our database as a database table, so that we can reuse that model on any Sankey that we build with that database. So there's always ways to sort of like get the data where you want it, or where you can manage it in an easier way. We've got one more question.
I think that's a great idea. One thing I'll note is that if you, I had to switch some things around with the equal with Sankey, so the model data is slightly different from the other ones. So just something to be aware of.
That's good to know. One more question. So when adding additional steps in the Sankey, I'm assuming you densify each curve. So can you give an example of that? So like when you have like a 3-step Sankey instead of a 2-step.
Yeah. Ultimately, and well, let me share again, right?
I was gonna say, you need to stop not sharing.
Yeah. So this 1-level Sankey or 2-level Sankey is 3 separate sheets, right? It's a bar sheet, it's the curve sheet, and it's another bar. So if we were to add another flow to this, like another step, then we have to add 2 sheets. We have to add another curve sheet and another bar sheet. All of the sort of data densification and all that logic, all the data densification is built into the data source. So you don't have to worry about doing that again. What you do have to do is essentially sort of copy these sheets, right? Duplicate those sheets. And then we have to duplicate a bunch of calculations, right? So we have to duplicate these bar calculations, pretty much all of these and all of these. And then you do have to edit them each. And make sure that the references are all pointing to the right place, and then switch them out on these sheets as well to the new calculation. So it's a bit of work. My multi-level Sankey, the regular multi-level Sankey, I think has 5 steps, and the equal width I think has 5 steps as well, right? So you can do up to 5. Once you get past 5, you are going to have to start doing that. And I believe on the blog I have a short blurb on how to add additional steps to your Sankey.
Great. Thank you. We are going to go ahead and move on. If you want to stick around, kind of look at the chat, there's a lot of like, holy crap,
Sure.
this is awesome, which, you know, you're probably used to. So you mentioned at one point, though, that you will be presenting at, or you have presented some of the stuff at TC. Well, TC is coming up, and you and your brother are doing one of the sessions at TC, sort of a newer version of what you did last year. We're also going to, you know, there's both virtual sessions as well as in-person sessions. The virtual sessions are basically just, you know, the video of what's happening in person for those who can't make it to Vegas. And that'll all be on Salesforce Plus. Your session is one of the virtual sessions. I looked at the Salesforce Plus's schedule, so it's going to be amazing to see that in what, two weeks, give or take. So yeah. So let's see, what else do I have to say about Tableau conference? There's a whole bunch that I'm supposed to say, but clearly I've forgotten. So I'm filling this time. All right. All right. So Tableau conference, for those of you who haven't been, it's a 3-day conference. I'm assuming that if you are going, you have registered already, because hotels are probably hard to find. Yeah, it's 3 invigorating days. Of Tableau stuff. For those of you who are not going in person, there are going to be a few options to participate virtually. So first off, there are some sessions are going to be on Salesforce Plus, including the keynotes and devs on stage on the first day of conference, Iron Viz on the second day, and a handful of sessions in between, including Ken and Kevin's session, I believe on May 9th, I want to say in the afternoon, but I can't remember now because it's all a little hazy in my brain.
I'm not sure about we're actually presenting twice, but I'm not sure
which
on
one of
Salesforce
those.
Plus twice. Yeah.
I think
we're doing
these
on
are only
May 9th and 10th. So
okay. I think it's the first day session that is on Salesforce Plus. But
okay.
If you're interested, you should go check out the Salesforce Plus link that I just threw in the chat. We are also going to have some virtual Tableau community TC watch parties and meetups. If you want to, one of the links that I threw in the chat was for a handful of those meetups. So go check those out. They are, you know, drop in, drop out as you wish. At least one of them, the keynotes and devs on stage, is going to be a watch party plus conversation. The other ones are going to be recaps at various times. You know, after, like on day 3 of the conference. We also have a Tableau conference Slack channel. So whether you're virtual or in person and want to share what you're seeing, or, you know, what you've heard, what you've seen on Twitter about TC, feel free to throw comments in that Tableau conference Slack channel as well. So that is it about Tableau conference, I think. If anyone wants to share their past experiences at TC, we will have a breakout room in a few minutes about TC as well. So I'm gonna pass this on to Ginny.
All right, thanks so much. We're going to wrap up before we start our breakout rooms. We would really love it if you fill out the survey and tell us what you thought about today's meeting. I know we're all probably sick and tired of taking surveys, and if you work in IR like me, you're probably sick and tired of distributing surveys as well. But hey, that's one of the best ways that we can make sure that we are giving you what you want to see. So please fill out the survey. Next, we want you to register for the May HETUG meeting, which is going to be on May 23rd. We're going to have meet a community member with Katie Stevenson from Rice University, followed by tips and tricks, and that may be you. We do not have anyone scheduled yet, so if you have something you would like to share, tips and tricks, 15 minutes or so, go ahead and fill out the interest form, which is at the bottom, or you can meet with us in the breakout rooms in just a few minutes and talk to us about what you are thinking. Also, we'll have Michael Faulkner from Surrey Community College talk about student success and Tableau Public. We also have links for you to register for Analytics Day and the Data Dev Hackathon, which Roshni can probably give you some more information about if you would like it, because she's really good with that stuff. Me, not so much.
We also will have a breakout room for the Data Dev Hackathon if anyone is interested in either putting up a higher ed team or just participating or learning more. So
Excellent. So check these off your list. Fill out the survey, register for next month, and then if you'd like to present, either fill out our interest form or come meet with us in the breakout rooms. Sign up for Analytics Day, sign up for the hackathon, and stick around if you have a few more minutes.
and we are going to throw all of these links, at least the ones that you've seen on the screen, maybe some of the ones that have come up in the chat, in Slack at some point. It probably won't be today. It'll probably be when we have the recording up, but do stay tuned for that. That's it for today, right?
I do believe so.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll open up the breakout rooms in just a second. And so thank you again to Ken, to David, and to Ginny for talking with us, presenting for us, and just being awesome Tableau community members. And thank you all for joining us today.